Hey everybody, it's Glenn, back with another episode of Action Figure Evolution, where I trace the various plastic incarnations of a particular comic book character, and in this episode, it's the Lizard. The Lizard is probably my favourite Spider-Man villain. I know Spider-Man has quite the rogues gallery of villains to choose from, but if you were to point a gun to my head, I'd probably pick the Lizard as my favourite. And then probably shit my pants. For those of you who don't know the Lizard, shame on you, you should, but I will just trace the history of the Lizard in 60 seconds or less. He is one of Spider-Man's earliest villains, appearing back in the 1960s. He was a doctor in the US Army who ended up losing an arm in an explosion, and then as a scientist, he tried to replicate the Lizard's ability of regenerating a limb. He developed a formula to regenerate his own arm. He took the formula, and the formula kind of worked. It did regenerate his arm, but the side effect, very big side effect of the formula was he ended up looking like some kind of lizard humanoid monster. So the collection of Lizard action figures you see in front of you here, it's certainly not an exhaustive collection. It doesn't represent every Lizard action figure that is out there, but it's certainly a very good sampling of action figures that have been pumped out by toy companies over the years. And the earliest one being in the middle here, the Spider-Man animated series figure, dates back to the mid-90s, back when the Spice Girls ruled the world. Yep, he's that old. Time flies by in a haze of collecting action figures and toy customizing. And the most recent one being the Hasbro's 3 3/4 inch Lizard here, which I picked up at Toys R Us this very week. So let's get into it. So as I said, this is the earliest representation of a Lizard action figure that I have. It's from the Spider-Man animated series, which was wildly popular back in the 90s. It's not actually the first incarnation of the Lizard in toy form. I believe the Lizard did pop up in Mego form in the late 70s, which if you never heard of Mego, they're kind of on the threshold where action figure meets doll. They're about a 8-inch articulated figure, all with fabric costumes. They were popular in the late 70s, early 80s, and kind of have a cult following these days. But back to these figures. Spider-Man animated series, produced by Toy Biz, 5-inch scale series of action figures. And very naive by today's standards, but if we went back in a time machine, this was kind of the cream of the crop of action figures. It's kind of laughable by today's standards, but back when I collected these in the 90s, I actually thought this was a decent looking figure. The smaller guy here is a die-cast figure, in that it's made of metal. It's kind of surprisingly heavy. Spider-Man animated series and the X-Men animated series both produced these small die-cast versions of the larger 5-inch action figures. There were also 12-inch versions of some figures. The Lizard features the famous 5 points of articulation: legs, arms, head. In addition, he does bend at the knees, and his tail can be articulated, and if you're buying loose on eBay, is often lost. So, like I said, at the time it wasn't too bad looking. It's a fairly good representation of the Lizard as he appeared in the animated series. I guess the real downside to this figure is his weird vinyl plastic Mac. He's not gonna satellite the fashion runways of Paris in that, but I guess if it rains he won't get wet, right? This Lizard figure, also by Toy Biz, Probably came out late 90s at first, and Toy Biz sure did get its money worth out of this figure's mould. This figure appeared in the tail end of kind of various Spider-Man animated series figures, and appeared in various guises in the later Spider-Man classics. And in fact, this figure even popped up when Hasbro first took the Marvel license. This figure appeared in Spider-Man Origins. So this figure probably has had a lifespan of about 15 years. I think ultimately now the mould has been retired. I'm not a huge fan of this figure. I appreciate they tried to kind of produce a dynamic looking figure with a kind of flailing lab coat. And I guess the inspiration for this figure is Todd McFarlane's penciling on the Spider books, the way he drew the Lizard, which kind of up until that point the Lizard had been a largely kind of goofy looking character, and it wasn't until Todd McFarlane drew him that he just kind of visually reinvented the Lizard and just made him this much more menacing looking character, in the way that Todd McFarlane kind of just blew comic books wide open, really. He had a way of drawing characters that just kind of pumped a new life into characters that had bumped around the Marvel Universe for decades. So it features kind of all the typical articulation, arms, legs. It does articulate at the knees. The tail is posable. And all important, the key feature to the figure, he does have an articulated jaw, which I think for a Lizard figure is a must. Hello, I'm the Lizard. Next up, it's the Spider-Man and Friends Lizard. Not sure what this lizard was called. Maybe he was called Bathtub Lizard. He does come with this kind of plastic mock rubber ring for the lizard to sit in, so you can float him around your bathtub while you're soaking in your birthday suit. Like all the Spider-Man and Friends figures, it does feature this attachment on the back through which you can attach the accessory. So Spider-Man and Friends was Toy Biz's attempt to tap into the preschool market. I guess the earlier you can get your consumers addicted to your brand, I guess the more likely they are to stick with you later in life. But I like this figure. He's cute. I was quite a fan of the Spider-Man and Friends figures. They certainly had a lot of character about them. Of course, as it's preschool market, a lot of the kind of villains tended to be a lot less villainous than you might otherwise expect. I guess they didn't want to scare the little kids. And I think the cutest thing about this figure is Lizard features this tiny little tail in the back. And here's the only Lizard figure to appear in the Marvel Legends proper line. It's from the Fearsome Foes box set, which also saw versions of Rhino and the Vulture. I know this figure is one of Webhead X's, YouTube's very own Webhead X's favourite figures. As with Marvel Legends in concept, it features a whole heap of articulation. So this is one for all you ACBA guys out there, and a fairly decent sculpt on him. I like the look of this figure. I kind of wish the tail was a bit more bendable than it is, which I found a problem with a lot of figures that have tails in Marvel Legends. Blackheart is the same, and I guess maybe this is just a kind of reality of manufacturing. They never seem to be able to run the wire all the way to the tip of the tail, so it kind of bends at the base, but then you can never bend the tip. But like I said, that's probably just the reality of manufacturing limitations and Toy Biz trying their best. But yeah, fairly decent figure. If you don't have this, pick him up. And like I said, the only Marvel Legends proper Lizard figure, but Lizard in various guises did pop up in the Marvel Legends era sister line Spider-Man classics, such as this Ultimate Lizard figure here. So this is the Lizard as he appears in the Ultimate series of comics, and it's a very good reimagining of the character. He looks much more lizard-like, appropriately. This figure did come with a button. Spider-Man Classics figures tended to have more of a play feature, be more marketed towards the kids as opposed to Marvel Legends. It featured a button on the side which caused his tail to whip side to side. Unfortunately on my figure that button has broken off. And that tail swiping action was to be used on a lab table, which broke into pieces at the thrashing of the lizard's tail. I don't have that lab table anymore, but if you track this figure down, mint in package, that lab table, it's actually a very good accessory if you ever need to have a lab table as prop in your ACBA displays. That's a good one to head for. But like Legends figures, it features a whole heap of articulation, so you can get him into a whole bunch of poses, and of course features the articulated jaw. So this Ultimate version of the Lizard led to this guy, at least in design, seems to be inspired by it. Taking this as inspiration and adding a whole lot of steroids. Now this is probably my favourite Lizard figure. There's a whole lot of bang to the buck with this one. Although seemingly inspired by the Ultimate version of the Lizard, this Lizard is from the short-lived Spider-Man animated series which ran briefly on MTV, I think for only one season. And it kind of reinvented a lot of Spider-Man villains in curious ways. The animated series was a CGI animated series, which is largely forgettable, but at the very least it gave us this guy, which is a great looking figure. Now I think this figure, it along with a Spider-Man figure were the only two figures produced from that animated series, and they weren't very widely distributed. They were largely ended up in comic shops and specialist collector retailers, similar to kind of Marvel Select and that type of figure. Does feature a lot of articulation. There are multiple points of articulation in the tail. Does feature some articulation at the ankle there, but the rest of the leg is fixed. But what you lose in articulation there, you certainly make up with in dynamic sculpting. I mean, look at this guy, a great looking figure. Love him. We've kind of come on leaps and bounds from these days, huh? Next up is Hasbro's first stab at a Lizard action figure. If we discount Hasbro's reuse of the Toy Biz Lizard mould for its Spider-Man Origins series, but this is its first proper attempt. It's from the third Spider-Man movie, or the video game that came out at the time of the third Spider-Man movie. And weirdly, this is a 5-inch scale action figure. Before Hasbro switched to the 3 3/4 inch, they tried to ease us 6-inch scale collectors into shrinking figures with these 5-inch figures, both with the third Spider-Man movie and the second Fantastic Four movie. Both of those lines were 5-inch action figure lines. and then ultimately they shrank further to the 3 3/4 inch. A few years from now, I'm sure Hasbro will shrink them so they're invisible to the human eye and literally package air, and yet still put a whopping price tag on it. I do like this figure. It has quite a good look about it. I guess it falls down on the basis of the fact that it falls down. Action figure 101 for me is always make an action figure that's capable of standing up. Nope. And if it's not capable of standing up, at least provide a display base so it can be stood up. Nope. I'm determined. Lizard, stand up, behave. Maybe if we counterbalance with the arms forward, will he stand up? No. Oh, no. Phew. The other downside to this figure is the tail, which comes kind of articulated to kind of enable this tail swipe action, which is a pretty cool action, I guess, if you have Spider-Man figures that you want to strike, but it doesn't leave for a kind of very pretty looking tail. But this line, hey, it's one for the kids, so who am I to complain? Even though I've complained about him not being able to stand up, I do like the feet on this guy. And he comes with articulated jaw. Those kind of ugly Hasbro elbow joints. But nice, decent paint on him. The jacket there, it's got some kind of dirt paint effect on it. Some kind of nice tones on the skin. This is back in the days when Hasbro gave a fuck and actually painted figures. This tiny little guy comes from the most recent effort at Spider-Man animated series, Spectacular Spider-Man. There is a larger 6-inch scale version of the figure available out there, but I couldn't find it anywhere, so settled for this guy. This figure came with a kind of slime Spider-Man playset, which I quickly dumped. I just bought this to get the figure. And surprisingly, for a figure of this scale, it features surprisingly a lot of articulation. Arms, legs, head and tail. Not bad, huh? I kind of wish I had the larger scale version. It's quite a decent looking figure. I like the stylisation of the animated character design. Here's another stab by Hasbro at a Lizard action figure, this time in their 6-inch series of Spider-Man action figures, but I can't let Hasbro take all the credit for the figure you see here before you, because this is a repaint I've given this Lizard figure to add a lot of depth to him, which was otherwise flat plastic, which in its flatness hid really how good the sculpting on this figure really is. There's a lot of really nice detail on his scaly skin. I also replaced what was this weird looking fabric lab coat with this rubber one, which I modified from a WWE Undertaker action figure. If you've not seen my makeover of this figure before, you can check out a video where I show before and after pictures of this figure. Gives you a idea of the efforts I made in customizing him. Like I said, some decent sculpting here. I mean, is let down by lack of articulation. There's actually no articulation in the legs whatsoever, yet the tail is articulated. And unfortunately, no articulated jaw on him, although his head does have kind of a couple of points of articulation there, so you can get his head into some decent poses. But honestly, I think I would have rather sacrificed the articulation on the face there for jaw articulation, because he is still articulated at the base of the neck here. And finally, my most recent addition to my lizard collection of action figures. It's Hasbro's Spider-Man, 3 3/4 inch lizard, who I believe they call Sewer Clash Lizard, something like that. And I do have to give Hasbro some credit. As much as I despise 3 3/4 inch figures, Hasbro have upped their game recently on the Marvel Universe front, and initially in packaging I did think this was quite a decent looking figure, but having removed him from packaging, I'm really quite disappointed in him. Legs are kind of hopelessly out of scale with the rest of the figure. The feet especially are tiny compared to the size of his hands, which in the packaging, the kind of feet are hidden by the kind of banner across the packaging where it reads, you know, lizard or whatever, sewer, fuck lizard or whatever it's called. So I got him out of packaging and was like, oh, his feet are tiny. Maybe that's a second side effect of this lizard formula he takes. Turns him into a monstrous humanoid lizard and shrinks his legs. But they've done a good job with the lab coat. It kind of, you know, looks dirty. They've put some effort into that. Looks like he lives in the sewer. But then the kind of detail on the coat only kind of aids to make the lack of paint on the green lizard skin, makes it even look even flatter, really. I don't like the colour green that they've used. It's kind of very it's very bright and vivid. Kind of, I think would have been better as a kind of earthier colour. It just kind of generally looks a bit Happy Meal to me. Except disappointingly, this cost about 3 times the price of a Happy Meal, and I didn't get a burger and fries with it. Anyway, hate to end on a down note like that, but hey, that's my opinion. We're all entitled to it. If you guys love this figure, you know, please do. There's got to be a yin and a yang to bring balance to the universe. And I will leave you with that karmic note. I've been Glenn. Thank you for watching this video. Please comment, rate and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.